similar, and one of the old-fashioned. I'll have to look at that one because that's probably from the 1930s. So, at any rate, the story tonight is, what is my subject tonight? Oh yes, we're going to do photographs all the way through. And I brought some books here because the library is full of them. And this has been my Bible, primarily since 2001. It's Huntsville, The Spirit and Resolve. It doesn't look the same. It's been reprinted, but there are copies up there. This was done by LACAC, the local architectural conservancy group in town, who with hundreds of volunteers, and Susan Pryke, who was the mayor of Muskoka Lakes, in celebrating the year of 2000, they undertook to publish this book. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of research went into it, and the result is an incredible history. It's one of the most popular books in town. You can buy it for a lot more money down at Kohl's, but we have them here. We have the copyrights to them now, the Historical Society. And by the way, I'm wearing two hats tonight. I'm the president of the Huntsville Train Station Society, and I'm the treasurer of the Historical Society. We all got together and decided we needed another society. So at any rate, this book is a really, really good history of Huntsville. And before I start the pictures Leanne is going to go flipping through, I want to give you a timeline. It should be here too. Yes. Very quickly, the timeline, so you can get an idea of where we're going with this. 1867, Confederation. 1869, Captain Hunt came to the end of the Muskoka Colonization Road. And if you have not seen David John's story of the Colonization Road, go in the back hall of Town Hall, and it's all up there in great big posters. 1871, the first bridge was built on Main Street. It was not the swing bridge. 1875, the Grinnell locks were completed, linking Marion and Ferry Lakes, and the first telegraph line came into Huntsville. 1886 was the first train into Huntsville. And there was a two-story passenger train station built, which included two attached buildings. One was a freight shed and the section tool shed, which makes that freight shed one of the oldest three remaining in Canada. Also in 1886, Huntsville became a village. In 1892, the Grand Trunk Railway takes over the Northern and Pacific Junction Railway. And there were probably 14 railways before that because private enterprise built the railroads and they rolled one into another. Also in 1892, the canal was dredged between Ferry and Peninsula Lakes, and we all know the consequence of that. I'll get into that in a bit more detail. In 1889, the new swing bridge was opened, and we know why. In 1904, the Porter's Flyer began its operation between Peninsula Lake and Lake Bays. 1906, the Forester stated that there were 10 first-class passenger trains to Huntsville daily. 1920, the Big One Hotel opened. 1923, Canadian National Railways acquired the Grand Trunk Railway. And in 1924, this station was built because the other one, the two-story wooden structure, was in such a state of disrepair. In the 1930s, the first ski trains to Muskoka arrived at the station, and they were greeted by local citizens, marking the beginning of winter tourism. Via Rail first, and later Ontario Northland, used this facility for passenger services. In 1988, Huntsville designates the Huntsville train station as being of architectural and historical value of interest. And then, in 1993, the Historical Sites and Monuments Board of Canada designated the station a heritage railway station under the terms of the Heritage Railway Stations Protection Act, which meant no more stations in Canada could be demolished, except they left one part out. You must maintain them. So if something went wrong, it didn't get fixed. In 2001, the town of Huntsville decides not to purchase the station. This is after 11 years of discussions regarding the purchase and CN and other associated bodies. They had been discussing this for 11 years, and in total it took 13 years before the station was finally acquired. And the Friends of the Huntsville train station formed up in response to the town's decision not to do anything about it. This group evolved into the Huntsville Train Station Society in 2002, a not-for-profit incorporated organization that has charitable status. And it was created to work with the town to purchase and renovate the station. In 2003, the town of Huntsville acquires the station from CN, and work begins on renovations to the freight shed. We had to do that first, and I'll explain why later. In 2003, just before the deal was signed for this by about a month and a half, I think there's a chair over here, sir, and there's one in the back. In 2003, the Great Train Adventure raised over $33,000, taking 235 passengers to Toronto and back in one day, and what a party that was, all the way down and all the way back. We put them on sober and they rolled off. In 2004, CN employees moved into the newly constructed offices in the freight shed next door. Not here, this is Suzuki, next door. And renovations and repairs could finally begin on the station interior. In 2005, the town of Huntsville and the Huntsville Train Station Society are joint recipients of a Built Heritage Stewardship Award from the Muskoka Heritage Foundation for their work on the train station. In 2007, CPMRT, and another anachronism for the Committee Promoting Muskoka Rail Travel, was formed to make ONR aware of the missed marketing opportunities in Muskoka, and a deputation to the ONTC board and to Minister Gravel, by the way, he was minister then and he's minister now, of Transportation, at Queen's Park with Norm Miller. In 2012, we all know the last ONR train went through here. 2013, the station becomes available for the lease. And in 2014, the Huntsville Lake-Based Chamber of Commerce, along with their three station masters, the Huntsville Art Society, the Huntsville Train Station Society, and the Huntsville and Area Historical Society, formed the Culture Station. And also in 2014, the signal arms were added as the last touch, almost like the icing on a cake on the track side. So that's your brief history. And now we can go ahead and tell you the story. So you can start, Leanne. We know who I am. This is Ontario Northland's map, and this is probably from mid-1900s, from Toronto up to Moosonee. And I'll just give you the background. This track is owned by CN and creates all the problems as far as running passenger rail, because whoever runs passenger rail on the section from there to North Bay has to rent the track from CN at whatever price. This piece is owned by Ontario Northland. They own all the track and all the, whatever you call them, locomotives and engines and stuff. I'm the building person, by the way. I don't know a lot about trains.
Rolling stock.
Rolling stock, thank you, rolling stock. So this is always the problem in here. Next slide. So this is my favorite picture. And I'm going to come back to this one because there's a few things about it. This is the memory of what the train station looked like in its heyday. Wentworth Fulkins took a little liberty with it. He squeezed up the shoreline and the train station. But in going back and looking at pictures, that waterfront has actually been extended from what it was, because I'll show you pictures later on of all of the lumber parked on there. But this is basically the one that has the nostalgia that people seem to fall in love with, which is the steam era. Go ahead. Yeah. This is a very poor site map, and I apologize. Land Registry would not let me steal the one that's down there. It looks like this, and it hangs on the wall in the baggage room. The one at Land Registry is from 1922. It's on oilcloth. And all I can do is get a print of it. And then two of the gentlemen, Owen Swan and the gentleman from South River, Mr. LeMay, Len LeMay, put all these little strings onto what all these buildings were on this. So I urge you to take a look, because it shows the number of tracks. You can go on to the next slide. I'm not sure we're going to see it, but they start at Yonge Street, and they start with 1 and they go up to 4 tracks in the next one. This is Muskoka Wood, which you know as Tembec. And that's the bridge, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. The bridge that goes across Hunters Bay. Actually, they called it Vernon River. And the next one. Okay, so we have the Roundhouse train station, and at that time, just the freight shed. Somewhere down in here, there's a watering station, but you'll see how the tracks split. One went down to the waterfront and then backed up to fill up with water. This is where the dock ended up coming across. And you'll also see something that you don't see today, the second set of tracks that came around behind the train station and joined up on the other side. One set stopped here, and the other set continued right around. So when you see the picture, I'm explaining it to you, you'll understand that. Next. Okay, this is, people call it all sorts of different names. Building at the top of the hill here is called Vernon House. It was called the Workers' House. It was called the Bayview. I don't know, tell me what else. At any rate, yes?
The Vermin House.
The Vermin House, okay. Thank you. It's Mr. Tapley, right? Yes, so it is, by the way, being renovated as we speak. Todd's doing a really good job over there. Next, please. So this is a planned siding of additional sidings for the Muskoka Wood Company after the fire, and it was reconstructed in 1922. So this is the last drawing I have. We can't seem to find any other records. Next slide, please. This is the one I'm most familiar with, and the town is most familiar with, because this is what we bought. So, Main Street, Hunters Bay, the dock, the walkway to the station, the tracks, the station, the freight shed. The yellow on the bottom is Huntsville property. The yellow on the top is Huntsville property. The track is all CN's. The town owns the spaces in between, and they have a right-of-way to the platform out here. This is the old district pumping station, which has been decommissioned. It's up just below the sign on Main Street, and this is the road that goes down behind the Vermin House. Next, please. So the Grand Trunk Railway was quite a substantial railroad in its time. I'm going to go back to my yearbook again. Had the railway not arrived, Huntsville would not be the community it is today. There would be no lumber industry, no tannery, and no navigation company. Huntsville would not have become the gateway to Lake of Bays or the port of entry to the popular tourist destinations in northern Muskoka Lakes. Much of the credit for securing the railway is given to Dr. Howland for convincing the provincial government to run the railway through central Muskoka instead of westerly through Parry Sound. Dozens of railway companies formed, prospered, merged, or died in the early days of steam transportation, and eventually in 1883 the Northern and Pacific Junction Railway was formed and brought the trains to Huntsville in the summer of 1886, the year that Huntsville became a village. And Grand Trunk took over at that time. So in 1888, Grand Trunk took over. This map I don't have an exact date on, but you can see the network that Grand Trunk owned at the time. The original station down here, should we go to the next one? The original station down here was a two-story wooden station, estimated to cost $12,000. It included a passenger and freight station with a station master's residence above the passenger station. The complex included an iron turntable and engine house. So here you can see the tracks coming around. There's one other set over here, and all the industry in the back corner where Avery Beach is. Okay, new rail. I want to insert this. The new rail line brought with it prosperity and growth for the chosen community. Merchants and citizens could import anything they desired. Farmers could ship out their produce. I understand we had some of the best cream produced. And the lumbering industry could ship out its logs, and the tanning industry could ship out its hides. Passengers could disembark from the train at the adjoining wharf on Hunters Bay, take the lake steamers to the various locations on holiday in the country. The glory of this train and steam era added excitement to travel. So now we're back. This is from a colored postcard. And this definitely shows the train track going all the way around. And this building back here was the station agent's house afterwards. So the Roundhouse is in here. Can't point out too many other ones on that one. Go ahead. Old wooden boxcars being loaded. Hard labor. Keep going. Now, this is the Muskoka Wood Company, which turned into Tembec. And you can see how prosperous it was, and you can see how barren the fields are. And this is only one picture. You've seen all the pictures of old Huntsville. It didn't have trees. There they are there. You're only seeing the wood company, the tanneries on the right-hand side. Next, please. This is what you call a horse-drawn scaffold, so that they could take the lumber and load it onto these piles on the boxcars. Next, please. So here we are with the new 1924 station. Notice the boardwalk down to the waterfront?
Oh, cool. Take your life in your hands.
And actually, it's the next one. So this one is showing you where that boardwalk was. And if you walk out here, you'll see an indent where this weed is growing. And then there's another indent here in the concrete, and that's where the walkway would have gone over the hill. Next, please. This is looking north, up towards Vernon House, here on the right. Look at the clothes. That would be what, 1940?
Yeah.
Roughly? Next, please. And this is a little higher view, probably from Vernon House. And now they've taken that one set of track out of here that was coming around, and they have access all the way around the side, and the freight stops here. It's actually unloading at the freight shed down through. But you see how shallow this is? Look at the height between the water and the track. I don't remember walking down there and seeing it like that. So they either filled it in, we'll have to find that piece of history again. Next, please. I guess that's a work party. And it looks like they are 1940-ish. And all of the factories that were here, the lumber factories, have disappeared. Next, please. Downtown Huntsville in the glory days.
Wow.
I always love the pictures that they put in the storefronts in the downtown stores. I think Elizabeth could answer that, but I think the Historical Society or LACAC produced those pictures for the various merchants downtown, did they? Was one of the projects? Yes. And so you got a feeling for what some of these buildings were. Very lucky in Huntsville to have the old buildings remaining. Next, please. Now this is a painting that is called the Rust Worm print, and you probably have seen a number of paintings aside from the Falcons. This is one. The Rust Worm print is one that we acquired rights to be able to sell up here as well. And next, and this is a pen and ink drawing that a local artist, Stephanie Salmon, did, and it is a beauty. And it hangs actually above the doorway in the museum. Okay. So this would have been, this is a picture that came from a gentleman in Peterborough, again, who showed up one day with a picture in his hand and said, I found these. His brother-in-law stayed in that building. This is the water tower, the freight shed, and the press office. What age would those cars be, gentlemen?
20s.
19?
20s and 30s.
20s and 30s? Okay, thank you. Because like me and my grandchildren, I don't write on the backs of the pictures because they're digital and they're on the computer, so unless I've got a date on them, I forget, so I have to go back to the photo albums and do it. Am I in the wrong spot?
No, you're perfect.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. So look at the turret on that. That's gone, of course, but the brick building, I think, is it Jerry O'Reilly that lived there? Just up the road here? Just recently? Okay. So, In 2002, the year before the town acquired the train station, we were so sure that we were going to get our way, and as Hugh would say, I was a pain in his ass, but at any rate, Hugh Mackenzie. But the people who were working with us as volunteers felt very strongly that this building has a purpose in town for the community, and lo and behold, here we are. But at that time, we were so determined that nothing should prevent it from being enjoyed, that we went ahead and got incorporated and got charitable status because we knew that we had to fundraise to assist the town to make this happen. And we did. Go ahead. So when they do a transfer from CN, who owned the station, to the municipality, an Ontario Heritage easement comes with it, and in that there's first of all the federal package, which is a photographic record of the building, and it was done in 2000, and then shortly thereafter there was one done by the province for the heritage easement. And in the package of documents I came across a few things that I really wanted to say because it doesn't look like this today. This is trackside, this is street side, this is the basement. So let's just look at the top here. Baggage room on the right, porte cochere, what they call the canopy. And then offices. Look at the number of people that worked here. The ticket office was right here. From this wall over there, that's the ticket office. The area behind me was the waiting room, and in behind that you'll see pictures of the ladies' washroom. And when this wall was put up, it's framed around the original wall, because part of the easement is that you have to be able to put it back. If you start mucking around with it, you have to be able to put it back. So these aren't there, but I have the doors downstairs if they're still in one piece, because I thought they'd be great to hang art on. There was a women's washroom with one of those old Eaton store settees so you could rest at the specific time. And then of course the men's washroom was awful. And then they had a tool room and large electronic panels to go with that signal tower that's out there in that silver box, which is the communications network, and then they did repairs. So that's what it looked like in here when we got a chance to look at it. And you'll notice there was even a little track to push one of those little, tell me what those little carts are, Doug? Jiggers? That's not what it is. No. A little maintenance cart. Yeah. Anyway, so down below, there is not a full basement, but there's a strip that runs from the cold room where Mackenzie's sitting, underneath there, furnace, and the new furnace, and water tanks, and over in here. So you're coming from this area through here. So this was a cold room. This is a crawl space that comes up to here, and that's a crawl space. So on both wings, it comes up to here with concrete around it, and it's totally full of sand. But this section down the middle, and the walkway, and then the stairs up into the baggage room, that's the basement. Next, please. This is what we got. Looked pretty sad. This was my big concern. See the gap in that roof was probably 12, 14 inches wide. It's held up by 4x4. It had reached the stage where if something broke, grab a sheet of plywood, stick it on. In other words, if the glass got broken, plywood the window. Next, please. Yeah, it didn't look happy at all. That's the pumping station, the district pumping station that was decommissioned up the hill. That's been squeezed really tightly. Okay? Yeah, see the gap? And here. So it was ready for repair. Okay? Plywood. Isn't that a welcoming entrance? That's what we got. That's welcome to our train station. So we got rid of all this and went underground with all of our utilities. Came up in over the hill. Next, please. There's your boarded up windows and the radiators and the old pay telephone, which only this year did they come and take out. I guess nobody had used it for a while. Next, please. There's your ladies' washroom doors. But I thought these would be nice for display. So I saved them. Okay. This is trackside. You see these troughs. I mean, look at the shingles here. It's just, It was at the point where if we didn't do something, we were going to have, and it's got these massive king trusses in the attic. If you know what a king truss is, they're beautiful. But you can only have damage to the roof for so long before you get water on the inside. Plywood windows. Okay? And that's just a fascia board that's not looking happy. Broken windows, so put plywood on the inside this time, just for decoration. Now, so in 2004, they bought the station in December of 2003. So in 2004, aside from the freight shed, which I'll talk about in a minute, the first thing was to put that new hat on. Get the ice and water on, put a good coat of shingles on, and if Rudy was here tonight, Dave, do you remember how many layers of shingles? We have a wad, probably 1.25 inches thick, would you say? With one shingle nail put through it, so I'm guessing there's probably 8 or 9 layers of shingles there at least. And so they stripped it down and started repairing the roof. They had to replace the roof decking on the porte cochere and in several spots on the roof. Next, please. So here's where you are now. Back to these windows, which by the way will have blinds very shortly. We've just got the funding for them. This is the operator's desk, the scale, which is sitting here, the washrooms, which were placed in the middle because on this side is Suzuki Strings, and in this false wall and beyond is the old ladies' washroom. Okay. The freight shed. This was my starting point. What do you do with a building that looks like that? You have to remember, this is a freight shed. This is for storing all the maintenance equipment. You name it. Heavy stuff, ugly stuff, dirty stuff, you name it, it's in there. And of course, all the loading bays were because the tracks came right alongside. This is all plywood. And Det could tell you, Det Schumacher could tell you that in 1952, when he arrived, a lot of those windows were boarded up. So I would suggest that most people in town are not even aware that there was glass underneath there. At any rate, we looked at it and we said, okay, put a new fur coat on it and see what happens. So let's see what happened. This is just another shot from the road. It was awful. So you couldn't get the siding material. So Rolston's helped me connect with Trout River. What's north of here? Trout River? Trout Creek? Trout Creek. Trout Creek. They had a mill up there that could duplicate the siding because it was important for us to be able to do what we could afford to recreate what was there. So there's all your plywood across the top. You can understand why we couldn't tell there were windows. All right, so let's go back here for a minute. This was our first project. We had a gentleman who said, I'll build the shed doors. And he was out of Anderson, so he built new shed doors for the whole place. Next, please. And they turned out absolutely, these ones are the original ones. These are not the new ones that he built. He built them for along the two sides. These are movable ones, which looked nice when they were painted 12 years ago. But don't look nice necessarily now. So we went from this to this. Another one, please. 320 panes of glass. Everybody remembers when the planing mill was around? And when the planing mill was sold, that was about the time the town was doing the transition into the planing mill while the renovations were going on at the town hall. The planing mill side was actually made available to us so that we could do things like take 320 panes of glass over the winter, and one of our super volunteers, Art Coker, who's a very common name in town, he spent his winter repointing and refinishing these 320 panes of glass, and of them all, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think there were only 5 or 6 that were actually broken. They just simply said after the first couple, plywood the whole thing. And so it actually preserved them. But nobody in town knew there was glass under it. Which meant that when we got them off and got the new ones back in again here, we had daylight in the freight shed. The siding, the building was strapped and wrapped with this new pre-finished siding, which was all painted over the winter. And then in spring, the kids from the high school came and put it up, which was awesome. Next, please. Now this is the interesting thing. most people in town are totally unaware of the office inside the freight shed. And this came about because of the arrangement that was made when the town purchased the train station. One of the big issues over the 13 years was, where are the employees going to go? They work out of the Newmarket subdivision, but they're here because they manage the track and keep the track safe for that distance. So unless you have a place to move them, don't talk to us about us selling you the building. So we had to come up with a plan to be able to move them with limited cost. And we knew that the freight shed was half occupied with stuff. Their stuff. And I said to one of the fellows one day, do you think all this stuff would fit in one half? And he said, absolutely. We don't use a lot of it anymore. It's just stored. So I took a look at it, did some measuring, and I said, okay. Walt Schmidt was here at the time, and I said, Walt, what do you think of this? A 760 square foot office, prefab inside the freight shed. That half is their stuff. You enter in here, there's a kitchen, full kitchen. In here is a full office for 4 people. Here's a washroom complete with toilet, shower. In here's the locker room. In here's the mechanical room with a washer and a dryer. Because they worked 6 days a week, and very often they didn't take their dirty clothes home, they just threw them in there. So what happened was, in the fall, the high school kids started prefabbing the wall sections, and Rolston's arranged to have them picked up, brought over, and stuck through one of the baggage doors that had not yet been installed. Half a dozen people, my husband included, Dave was probably there down on his knee pads, went in to try and figure out how we were going to do this on a floor that had probably a 15-inch hump in it. Okay? So, you know, you like to build on something that's flat. You should see the pictures of the shims. The shims are not cedar shakes. They are 2x4s, or 2x6s, or 2x8s, or many of them stacked together. Because getting a plumb run, and we didn't have one of those laser things that went around the room. And we didn't use the hose and the Kool-Aid to try and do it, but we had a couple of 8-foot levels and lots of knee pads, and it was, Dave, am I right, was it November? It was cold. November, December, you were there. You've forgotten, you had so much fun. Anyway, the first thing we had to do was find how we're going to build this floor. So we got the floor done, and then Rolston's delivered the walls, and the high school kids put these sections together. So we had designed the sections so that they would create this box. So think of a shoe box inside the freight shed with a door, 2 doors actually, and that is the office. And once we got the floor done, wall sections insulated, drywalled, the whole 9 yards and all the mechanicals, then we could move CN into their new office space. And all of that was part of the condition of sale. And CN had to approve that, and yeah, so it took us about 2.5, 3 months to build.
Who owns the building? Who owns
The
it?
town owns it. The
So
town owns it.
CN pay rent on it?
Yeah, $1 a year, and they pay
Oh.
utilities.
Oh, okay.
So, both buildings in the section, in the center. So, and they have it in perpetuity. So, they are our neighbors forever. Okay? Unless they close down the Newmarket subdivision, they will be there in perpetuity unless the town decides they have to move out, and then they would have to supply accommodation for them. At any rate, it's very nice accommodation. Part of the problem is it's not just the 6 guys that work here all the time. There are transient crews that come in
On school buses.
because they work north of here, and Huntsville has the only hotels in the area. So they tend to bring them in here, and they work out of here, and we get too many people working out of here and sometimes. Next please. I'm not going to go on any further. In 2008 we had some aerial shots. We had a big event here in Huntsville. You'll remember it as the G8 that didn't happen. And so with the cameras up in the air, we got some very good shots. And the one I love about this, there's the piers of the 100-foot dock. And you see how much wider that shoreline has become? It's not just that little narrow strip that the lumber sat on. So I love that shot because the next one, okay, here's where the story starts. This is squished up, okay? But you see this little boy down here in the corner? He's got his foot up against the building. If you could take him off of there, you would see those colorful iron corner pieces that are on that door and on this door, and I'll show you in a minute. I don't know whether I've got a picture in here, but at any rate, you can take a look on the way out. When the dock collapsed from disrepair, lack of use, etc., these little iron corner pieces, which stand about this high, were on this freight storage building, so that when the carts came over that rickety wooden trail over there, down with the storage, with the suitcases and so on, and they were storing things down there, that every time they hit the corner of the building, they would knock the building over. So these iron plates, and you'll see them there on the corner, they look like that. Owen Swan, who knew a scuba diver in the 60s, I think it was, ended up with 4 of them, the 4 off that building. They were pulled out of the water, and he kept them, hoping someday, like some of us, we find a use for them. So that's the story behind the corner iron pieces. They don't look the same as the ones on the baggage room door, because the ones on the baggage room door still have 17 coats of paint on them. But you'll see these ones. Liz Forder was one of our directors at the time, and she stripped all the paint and made them decorative. And what better use for them? We had 4, so 2 on there and 2 on there. Do have a look at them on the way out. Next, please. So we just thought that was a wonderful place to put them. Okay. This is the before picture. This is the Algonquin tied up at the long dock, and the building's in behind the boat. And you'll notice that there is no covered walkway. The platform was eventually covered with a 200-foot wooden structure, because you can imagine these ladies getting off the train in their lovely gowns and all their finery and their hats and their gloves and their helpers that come for the summer, and they're unloading steamer trunks and they can't get wet in the rain. And so they go off to get on the boat, and this beautiful long walkway, very much similar to the one at Big One Island. Next, please. So, of course, the steamships, this was when it was a swing bridge. No, it isn't. I'm lying. That's a newer picture than the swing bridge. But that is the swing bridge. It did swing. And that Algonquin would then sail from the town train station dock through downtown, out onto Ferry Lake. Next, please. Down through the canal. And I have to tell you a little story about that. The Algonquin sailing the canal between the ferry and Peninsula Lakes. An interesting note, there was a pivotal moment in the development of tourism in northern Muskoka and its importance as a navigable waterway from 1889 to the present day. This heritage waterway was recognized by the plaque erected by Heritage Huntsville with the assistance of the Ontario Heritage Foundation along the shore of the canal in 1995. The plaque states, Peninsula and Ferry Lake were originally connected by Peninsula Creek, a stream too small to be commercially navigable. In 1886, the province began construction of a canal that would improve transportation and commerce of the region by allowing steamships to pass between the 2 lakes. A channel 20 feet wide and at least 6 feet deep was dredged, and wooden retaining walls were installed. You'll still see those banks. The channel, 4,612-foot long canal, was completed in 1889 at a cost of over $19,000. A new bridge, high enough to allow steamships to pass underneath, was built in 1888. It was replaced by a steel bridge in 1915 and the present structure in 1990. This heritage waterway needs to be recognized in our new official plan currently being revised. And if I had known that the mayor was going to have his bike ride tonight, there would have been some politicians here, but they're all out riding the bike with the mayor. We are in the process of redoing our official plan, and that heritage waterway needs to be recognized because it is the link between the train station, the steamships, the swing bridge, the canal, Peninsula Lake, the Portage Flyer, and Big One. It is well, Dearest is on the way, yes, you're quite right. But I always, so anyway, that connection needs to be recognized, and it could become another feature that we have to offer people. We can't put the little train back there, but it is over at Muskoka Heritage Place, so they do have an opportunity to ride that. So, next please. Now, Huntsville Train Station Society can't exist without volunteers. So here's John. Next. He drives from Hamilton, by the way. He shows up. Where's the can of paint? See? This is the gardener lady, and I think her name is Mary. My husband, Trevor. Dave and John. And the results of some of the handiwork. And Russ is busy fixing the signals for the top of the signal mast. Now the train station looks quite lovely. See all the lovely windows? It turned out beautifully. So basically all they did with the freight shed is they put a new fur coat on the outside and put a box inside with the CN employees. That's how it ended up.
That's appropriate.
Yeah, and we ended up with the beautiful station. So Suzuki has this side, the culture station has this side. Good partners. Next, please. So when we moved in here in 2004, we had just finished the freight shed, and we looked around. It was pretty awful. The first thing they had to do was come in and take down the mess of the walls that were in here. But we pulled a number of things out. These chairs, I have no idea how long they have been here. They're still here today. But we took them down to a boat place in Port Sydney, and they recovered them and cleaned up the chrome. So I'm guessing they're probably from the, Helen, would they be from 1930s, 40s? The chrome chairs around the kitchen table? I would think so. Next. We have a number of benches that the high school built for us. Some of them, each one of the slats on the back have the kids' names, which is kind of neat. So the kids built, each year they built one bench, and I think that we did that for 3 or 4 years. Next, please. This desk, which is standing in here, is an original. We don't know how old it is, but, next please, this piece of equipment will tell its age when we can finally get a bit more information on it, because it's still under there, and it connected to something in this building that was moved by a pedal. And I'll let you know for the next chapter. Next, please. The marks in the floor, and you may have seen them, your feet are on them. These are the markings of where the office walls were. They go right around over by Roberta. Next, please. This one, which is by Alan, is a fill-in on the terrazzo from where the iron grate would have been above the coal furnace, and the chairs probably sat back to back like this so you get your backside warmed up, because gravity feed was the only heat in here. The coal chute was over there and the furnace was there. And the terrazzo, by the way, came about because we have the Anglo-Canadian Leather Company here, a lot of Italians, and what can they do really, really, really well? Most of the terrazzo in this town is done by the employees of the Anglo-Canadian Leather Company, and that was one of the things I wanted to bring. Just as a quick aside, when I was going through my grandmother's suitcase after her death about 25 years ago, I came across her little diary book, leather book, about this big. And in there, aside from her list of her bills, on the inside cover was Anglo-Canadian Leather Company, Huntsville, Ontario. And she was from Saskatchewan.
Oh.
She grew up in Petrolia, Ontario, so I'm assuming that's where she picked up the book. But there's that little treasure from the Anglo-Canadian Leather Company. Next, please. Radiators. After we had coal-fired gravity, they installed radiators. These radiators are non-functioning. They are simply here to show what they look like. Now we have grills in the floor that were cut when we were doing the renovations because they put a forced air gas system in here to produce heat. Next, please. Volunteers. Next. That's Patch. He was directing traffic that day. Martina, always collecting and selling memberships, which, by the way, you can buy on the way out. Memberships and our fundraising programs. Next, please. Now there's some people we know. Helen, I love that picture. These two people were so generous with their time and energy. Helen and Ron, love them to pieces. Next week, I am going to get you an original copy.
Thank you. That'd be lovely.
This is our most recent treasure. Again, just as this picture arrived tonight, this piece of equipment arrived a month and a half, 2 months ago. Anybody know what it is?
A signal.
A Headlight 4. Next picture, please.
Oh, wow.
So a gentleman down in Barrie, maybe his wife said, get rid of some of this stuff. I don't know, but at any rate, most of our donors are aging. And I say anything older than me is aging. So he had that in his house, and he said Lucille would probably like to have it, and Russ Nichols ran down and got it. And so I'll give you a little bit of background. It's a steam engine headlight. In 1896, George Pyle, who had been associated with Robert Pierce in the National Electric Headlight Company, adapted and elaborated on the newly developed steam turbine for use with the headlight. He also developed a simpler arc light. Pyle and the old National Company organization joined forces, now the Pyle National Company, and that's what we looked up on the web. They began production of the new light, and in 1899 sold 472 Pyle National headlights. So at least 472 engines in North America were using his headlight. Up to the previous year, fewer than 175 electric locomotive headlights had been manufactured in the United States, so he was really going to town. This headlight was donated by Tim Clements of Barrie. So we're very proud of it. It's sitting on top of the file cabinet. We were trying to figure out how to get the Art Society to make us a shape of a locomotive so we could just mount it above it. We're running out of space. Next, please. This is one of our treasures. Most of you probably can't see that writing, but if you go into the baggage room, you'll see it. This is Canadian Railway News Company. And Canadian Railway News Company, called CRNCO, it formed in 1893, selling newspapers, cigars, and candy, etc., 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 to travelers on steamships and railway lines. This trunk was used to store these items in the baggage car as it traveled along the Grand Trunk Railway. CRNCO is now known as CARA. And CARA operates Harvey, Swiss Chalet, Kelsey's, you name it. One of the longest, oldest private companies in Canada. And a few years ago, John Zablocki from Hamilton, the gentleman that comes to paint, he found this at a barn, in a barn in Southern Ontario, and he said, Seal would like to have that. And so then I got a hold of Cara, and it turned out they were just celebrating their 100th anniversary. So they had published this book, and then she sent me out one for the 125th. So we have a history in here, and if you remember, Cara, if I can get to the right page, the Wawa Hotel. Anyway, it's fascinating. They got involved with building hotels here. Scotia, up the Scotia line, they had a hotel. They had one in Graven. They owned the original Gravenhurst train station. They built out west. And when I was working in Toronto, they were also involved not just in steamships and trains, but they became involved in supplying food as Cara for the airlines. I don't know whether they still have that contract or not, but that trunk is, I don't even know if there are any of them left. But when he found that, I could not believe what I was looking at, and it doesn't even smell. Next, please. If you look up when you go into the baggage room, you will find an old wooden ladder. The old wooden ladder, with rungs missing, was found in the attic here when we were re-insulating, and the guys dragged it down. We can't use this, Lucille. What are we going to do with it? And I said, well, let's hang it from the ceiling. We'll hang things on it. So you will find lamps hanging all over the baggage room, and those lamps, just like the picture, arrive here and say, Lucille could use it. And so they go up, and the fellows that work with me on the Train Station Society, they're railroaders. They know these things. they write little notes saying what they are, and hopefully they stick them on it because I don't know what they are, but they're nice and they're artifacts and they are a part of this station. So each one serves a different purpose too. This is amazing. There's ones for the back of the train, ones for the front of the train, ones for walking down the tracks, checking things, and anyway, you can have a look. Next, please. Owen Swan again. He had a matching set of these. These are some of the original chairs that sat in the office here in 1924. This one he donated to us. He said, do not refinish it. Okay? That's what it looked like when he got it. And that's the way it's going to stay. I just have to put a little sign on it that says, don't sit on me. Next, please. Recent acquisition. This was in a printing shop in Bracebridge a couple of years ago, and we got it from the right track. If you're model railroaders, you know where I'm talking about. We needed a glass cabinet to show off our bits and pieces. Actually, Bob used to call it ephemera, and I do have a note here. The display cabinet is full of ephemera. I had to go to the web to look that up. I always call it stuff in the box. But anyway, it's items of collectible memorabilia, typically written or printed ones that were originally expected to have only short-term usefulness or popularity. So there would be writing pads, there would be telegraph pads, there would be order papers or whatever that aged. Anyway, we are using it for things that don't age, things that are ageless because they are collectibles. So, next please. Woo. This is another prize. This was rolled up in someone's attic. Arrived early 2004 or 2005 in a garbage bag. Actually, it was all rolled up and looking very tattered. It is an 1891 census map of Ontario, and Huntsville is listed down in the corner. And when we get it moved up the highest point on the wall, down lower, so you can actually read it, you'll see the Queen Victoria and her consort, Prince Albert, and then have a look at where the train goes through and where the communities are. We spend a lot of money having that put into a museum frame to protect it because it is probably quite valuable. Next, please. Our scale. Fun and games getting that out of the freight shed. Before we could deal with this rolling floor, this thing was buried in it. On the side that went down, it was down. And it took a tow truck volunteer with his truck and his lift boys took it apart, and they lifted it out of the freight shed, brought it around here, rolled it in, and reassembled it. It weighs several tons. Wow. Next, please. It is a grand trunk, so you know how old it is. These are the weights that we no longer leave on there because we can't afford to have them disappear. The scale weighs within ounces of accuracy. It is very good. Next, please. Okay, the train signals. This is going to talk a little about communications. And those signal arms, which I will tell you more about, were what I call the icing on the cake. That was the last piece of the building that makes it a heritage site as it was. Next, please. This is Telegraph. And the first telegraph line arrived in Huntsville in 1875, as I mentioned. And it remained operational at the station until the 1970s, when two-way radio and centralized traffic control became the operation norm. That's when the signal arms and boards were removed and, quote, stored by others. We don't know where they were stored, but they were not here until they were repositioned in the fall of 2014. And it's kind of interesting because it's like the baggage cart that's sitting outside right now. That is as old as this station. Probably more older than this station. It's probably closer to around 100 years old. How did it get from here to somebody's gas station? It's, you know, where do these things go? They get stored in garages. Next, please. This is Elmer Pollock. He donated his telegraph. Of course, they're not being used anymore. And he couldn't play on them. But he wanted it somewhere where we could use it. And now we have two, which means we can send a message from that room to this room. The wires are right here. So we can set up one telegraph here, and we can receive the information in the other room if we close the door. Next, please. Russ Nichols is showing the use of one in the other room. having a school class here to learn about old communication techniques is amazing, especially when one of them reaches in their pocket and pulls out that. and trying to explain to them that this and that and the other things that are in there do the same thing. Anyway, they were quite fascinated. These are 4 of our gentlemen who are, we can always count on them to come and do a telegraph display. Next, please. Teletype machine was donated by Patch. This is one that actually worked here in Huntsville. We're just in the process of getting the background information on it so that we have the parts for it. We might even be able to get it working. But if you remember, the little strips that came across that were glued onto the pieces of paper to make telegraphs, that's what the originator was. Next, please. The switchboard. This switchboard was used in Bracebridge Hospital. Now, why did we get it? Well, because they needed to donate it to somebody, and Lucille would like it. So, this was used in the Bracebridge Hospital between 1950 and 1980. It needed a home, so it was donated to the Huntsville Train Station Society by the Muskoka Perry Sound Telephone Pioneers in 2005. Switchboards were originally located at the telephone company's central offices and were used to connect subscribers together so they could talk. When businesses began installing multiple phones within their buildings, an on-site switchboard was used to connect a particular phone to an outside line. The switchboard also provided an intercom where the operator would connect one phone to another in a different part of the building. These were the first PBX, private branch exchange. And I certainly, when my husband grew up on the farm, he said the operators were always having people rubberneck. I'd never heard that term before, but anyway. Next, please. And this phone was used for communications between that building and the buildings next door. They would just tap on that and hold the receiver up to their ear. Okay. This is part of the telegraph story. This is a hoop. The telegraph operator would receive a message, and he would put that message on a little piece of paper. He'd fold that little piece of paper and put it into the string. There's a little loop there. He would wait for the train to come down the track, and he would stick it out for the engineer to grab the message. And the engineer did that by doing this. So he would have his arm out the window, and he would have the message. Okay? And that's why there's a whole shank of strings in that room, because they had to replace the string. Do you think they ever saved them? No. At any rate, that's how the messages, can you imagine how many times they had to back up the engine to get it because they missed it? So anyway, that's how the message was transferred. And the signals up top told them when there was a train on the track, or whether they needed to slow down, or whether they needed to stop. So that's hoop. Next. These are some of the different signals, and I don't have any for Canada. All I could find were the American ones, because they're not used anymore. Next, please. Train order signals came into being in North America railways in the late 19th century, using newly developed telegraph lines to deal with the problem of avoiding delays and collisions on rail lines. Before the telegraph was available, the train crew had to walk back along the track and set up flags or flares to warn any approaching train of the stopped train ahead. With the advent of the telegraph, information could now travel faster than the trains. The result was the establishment of the timetable system. Generally in use by the 1870s and 1889, the standard code of operating rules was adopted. Each station had a telegraph operator who reported when each train passed the dispatcher, who was responsible for a section of the rail line. The message indicated the time the train left the station and the direction traveling. UX for a train traveling up the line. Is that north? I don't know.
Yes.
DX, is it?
Yeah.
And DX for train traveling down the line. The signal was signed by the station master and kept in the custody of the operator. With this information, the dispatcher was able to control the traffic on his section of the line and deal with delayed or extra trains running off schedule. So these signals that they took down, because the telegraph wasn't being used anymore and were replaced with the communication tower, these were the ones that went astray. They were stored. And when we got them back, and again, they arrived standing up to the side of the building. No note, nothing. That's what they looked like. They were pretty cruddy. And next, please. And the signal arms were over in Perry Sound. This is an ex-retired CN employee, Randy. And he said, Lucille, got something for you. So off I went, and we got the signal arms for them. Next, please. And then we got them ready. So Wilson's the paint store. I got new hemlock from Gadrowski's. They cut them for me, and we fine-tuned them here, and Wilson's painted them up with hopefully a paint that will last a while. And then we got the arms painted up. We could not use the 3 colors of glass because this is a non-functioning set of signals. You could not run the risk of having the light glare through red, orange, and green. So they made us, after finding some nice red, orange, and green glasses for these things, they made us paint them out. But that's all we had to do for CN. They're all set to put their equipment back up on their mastheads. So, next slide, please. So there they were finished. We were so pleased. These are the old ones. Next, please. And there they were. The communications crew came in and checked out the mechanicals. Would you believe that was 1960s, 1970s? They went up, wiggled these things, they worked like a dam. Just unbelievable. They didn't even have to do any adjustments to them. They didn't have to add any parts. They just wiggled them. Next, please. So there they are putting the first one up. And the next one. And there we are finished. We finished a couple pieces too. Anyway, it was great. Next. So when you look at the things that were events that we put on here at the train station over the years, it's quite amazing because they all started in, this would be in the 30s when they had, the Winter Carnival included a ski train that came from Toronto. So people came up for the weekend and they would be greeted here by wagons and torches.
Everyone skis at Huntsville.
And they had a figure skating carnival, they had tobogganing, sleigh rides, dancing, skating, snowshoe races, and skiing. Leaving Union Station Friday, it cost $3.45 return.
What year?
In the 1930s. Next, please. We've also had model trains, the Scope Model Train Group has had their displays up here. Operating displays, which are kind of neat for kids to come and see. Next, please. The bike train. Again, a volunteer who, or a gentleman who really just wanted to put his bike on the train to Niagara Falls, found himself volunteering himself for probably 3 years creating the bike train. And he did just that. He did get his bike on the train. As a matter of fact, there are now bike train specials to Niagara Falls, and all the GO trains now going to Niagara Falls all have bike racks. So that took 3 years of perseverance. So when you believe in something, you go for it. Anyway, this group of people arrived by Ontario Northland's only bike train that was arranged, and they went biking for a couple of days on our wonderful trails. And it's too bad they don't come back now because we've got even better trails. Next, please. We had a strongman pull. We had a, how many tons was it?
That's great.
100, I was going to say 124, but that's probably not correct.
Wow.
Anyway, these guys tied themselves. These are 2 men from Bracebridge, father and son.
I love it.
And they put these harnesses on. These guys are world-class strongmen. They're from Bracebridge. And they put these tethers on them, and they got down, next please, and they started in this position, and then they got down on the track, and they tied this 125-ton, let's say, engine to their backs and pulled it. That wasn't the amazing part. Father stepped off and got a drink of water. Son gets down on his knees and slowly starts pulling the engine himself. Well, of course, what I didn't know, and I was all amazed that this was happening, all you have to do is get the wheel to turn, and then it'll roll. So it's a question of having that initial burst of strength to get it. Anyway, the kid who was 17 pulled the engine himself. Next, please. And then we had a trophy made up for the engine pulls, which is kind of neat.
Nice.
We didn't know the trophy went to, but next slide, please. We had weddings at the train station. in the winter. Next, please. We've had golf trains. Telus painted up an 1-hour train and brought up 4 cars, a couple hundred people to open the new Marco Mera golf course at Grandview. Next, please. So they were all loading up onto the buses that were waiting for them next. And there I was, because the building was all boarded up the day they came. We hadn't started renovations. So I sped up the sign, welcome to Huntsville, come again when we're finished our renovations. and you can look at the shed. Look at how awful. This is right when we had just acquired the station. So I wasn't going to let them know that we hadn't really done anything. And next, please. Art Coker, I mentioned him earlier doing all the window glazing. We had to put up a flagpole